Okay, so I'm so excited and honored to be in the presence of two wonderful, dear people, Camila Marambio and Lauren Gower. And I just wanted to start by saying the multinaturalism issue has arrived. It's here in my hands, and I wish it could be in your hands, but it's that hot off the press. It hasn't traveled any further than my office. And I wanted to start by showing you a page that is part of Camila's and the Brisbane artist Caitlin Fransman's beautiful collaborative article, which shows the embers of a campfire and the conversation that takes place around such a fire. And I thought that would be a really lovely image to start with, because we could think of what we're doing here today as a kind of yarn around the campfire. And so rather than being like the MC who does the official acknowledgement of country and introduces the two of you, I would like us all to acknowledge the country that we're on, and also the country that we come from, and maybe say a little bit about the journey in between those two spaces. So if you would kick us off, please, Lauren.
A campfire just feels so wonderfully right as well, because it is, the last few days here in Melbourne have been brisk as we move into the shorter days and cooler winds and climes. And I really love this time of year, actually. And here in, well, I'm actually at the meeting place of Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung countries. There's so many places here in Melbourne, particularly the Marambalik and Wurundjeri Willam clans of the Woiwurrung and the Yalukit Willam clan of the Boonwurrung people. I'm a trawlwoolway woman from my ancestral countries in the northeast of Tasmania, sort of the far northeast tip. So lots of sand and sea and sky, which is interesting because I was thinking about how it is exactly that I came. I haven't actually ever lived in trawlwoolway country. My parents did for some time after I'd already moved out of home, but I spend most of my time, I was born in Darug country in Penrith in New South Wales, and spend most of my time there when I was younger, and then in Panalapana country, just where the boat comes in, the Spirit, near Devonport in sort of central North Tasmania. But it was a walk along the south coast of Tasmania, the South Coast Track. I don't know if, yeah, you might be familiar with it. It's about 8 days or so, right down along this very southern coastline of Tasmania. And it was there that I met my partner to be a few years ago, and who was living right where I am now at the time. And yeah, over the next few months, I slowly made my way up here to Kulin country, and have been, yeah, absorbed in questions of what it means to live here in acknowledgement as a guest. The sorts of relationships that I, can be part of and sustain while I'm here, and how I can go about doing that. Yeah.
Thank you. How about you, Camila?
Thank you, Lauren. I was listening to you through this ear, and through this ear, I could hear the pelicans just outside my window. And maybe if the speaker of this computer is good enough, you can hear the Pacific Ocean beating quite loudly today. There is a tsunami warning for the whole coast of Chile.
And New Zealand too.
New Zealand too.
I woke up to that news. I was listening to New Zealand news. It was quite frightening. Everyone was being told to go to higher ground on the East Coast.
Yeah. So the land is trembling and the waters are shaking. And this land on which I live tremors almost daily. I hear it in the chinking of the glasses in my kitchen, and sometimes I hear it minutes before it hits the house even. So it's this rumbling noise, and it always humbles me to be reminded that the earth speaks, and that it has its wants, its needs, it's moving. And this is where my love of islands comes from, including the island of your family and your ancestry, Lauren. Wow, what a group of isles that is. Totally captured my heart. My heart is very nomadic, so I feel a guest on the planet, really. And Chile is the land where my parents and their parents and the parents of my grandparents have been for years and generations. And I have throughout my life been finding my way to meet this ancestry. But I was born on Yaqui country, way north in the Sonora Desert. So I have many imaginaries that live within me, and I try and honor them constantly, allowing the poetry of the cactuses from that land and all of the Chicana poets that live there to also move me and move my tongue. But I think today, whom I want to bring here are the pelicans and the dolphin that I saw minutes before I turned on the Zoom, and I knew that was a good sign for our campfire.
A dolphin in the campfire, it's such an interesting image. So I'm here right now on Wurundjeri country, the place I call home, and I work on Bunurong country, the South Bank campus of VCA, and I would really love to pay respects and acknowledge elders past and present, and also acknowledge Bunurong elder Nawit Carolyn Briggs, who was very generous with her time at the inception of the multinaturalism issue, and we had some good long talks. And I'm also really excited that we have Bunurong artist Jara Steele in the magazine, which I think is, you know, a beautiful synergy. And I feel like I should acknowledge Jajawarong as well, because my partner lives in Castlemaine and I spend at least one night a week on Jajawarong country. And so I feel like I kind of triangulate between these three countries, and I feel so fortunate to be able to move freely between them. And I'm a Pākehā non-Indigenous woman from Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I was born in Tamaki Makaurau, which is Auckland. The name for Auckland means land of 1,000 lovers, and because it's such a desirable place to live, and I love that place very much. But I'm also really feel incredibly privileged in every sense of the word to be on this unceded Aboriginal land, on this ancient continent, where I didn't ever plan to make my home, but it has ended up being the place where I live and work and love. And so, yeah, I'm enormously grateful for that. So I guess both of you have already talked to or talked about the kind of the beautiful island, well, at least of Tasmania. And I know, Camila, the island or archipelago dear to your heart is Tierra del Fuego. And maybe you could talk a little bit about that particular landscape and your relation to it. And maybe there will be some sort of resonances that Lauren has in thinking about the island that she comes from. And I think just in terms of my very little understanding of both of those places is they're not the kinds of islands that I imagine. When I think of islands, I always think of beautiful tropical islands. And these are kind of windswept places that are, you know, directly across the ocean from Antarctica, and that are kind of ends of the earth in their own ways, I suppose. And I just wonder what it is about those spaces that has been so foundational, perhaps, in the thinking and feeling and connecting with country and with maybe the planet as a whole. So maybe you could talk to that, Camila.
Sure. It's been a while since I've been to Caruquinca, Tierra del Fuego. Not only during this past year of quarantine, but even before. I think I'm going on almost 2 years away from my lover, my love, my family, a country that has offered me a tremendous sense of belonging, despite how complicated belonging is in a colonized world. And the reason for this distance, like I said, is not just the contemporary moment of restricted mobility, but it's something that happened to me even before then, in which I started to think and feel very deeply about the sacrifices that we make for that which we love, and for the ongoingness of our loved one or our loved ones, and how sometimes it's important to give space, to step aside, to silence, to let the other speak or be heard. And for many, many years, I have been in a very different kind of romance with Tierra del Fuego, which is just being totally nourished by this rich, lovely, biodiverse, extreme landscape that just, electrifies me and teaches me. I often say this, but it does teach me about my scale on the planet. And it's a very petite scale that we humans have on this planet. So as I heard you speaking, Tessa, about the relationship that I have, that I have with Caruquinca, I feel this nostalgia that has to do with knowing that you love a place and it loves you back, but that sometimes it's better not to tread on it, even to let it be well. And I got this feeling with Caruquinca, a feeling that I feel it whispered into my ear, really. So that's kind of what I bring to this conversation at the moment, in maybe in a similar line of the questioning that you mentioned, Lauren, about asking yourself how to be a guest in the country that you're on. So it's kind of two sides of that way of being in the world, which is that you're constantly aware that the world is alive and that it needs things from you, you need things from it, and so it's all about the listening and then the speaking, the conversing, the negotiating through different kinds of words with that world, so that we may strike loving relations with it.
I really relate to speaking and listening and the timing of that, and I'm still very much figuring out, I think, yeah, how and when to listen and how and when to speak. I've always wanted to visit Tierra del Fuego. It makes no sense. Well, perhaps it makes perfect sense. You'd think I'd want to go to these tropical islands, Tessa, being from such a cold place. But no, I just want to visit all the other islands, that, that might speak to Tasmania. Iceland's another.
Yeah, they speak.
Well, it's really interesting. As you were speaking, I was reflecting. Many years ago, I didn't end up eventuating, but I applied to study on exchange in Chile, and I spent a lot of years in Hobart and Muanina country in the south of Tasmania, and so many people. I was surrounded by scientists, and so many people were from Chile, so it just really felt that there was already then, the Australian Antarctic Division, for example, just being south of Hobart, and the Institute for Marine Antarctic Science being Hobart. There were just so many connections. And yeah, I've really felt that for a very long time. I think that they really do. They are places that speak to each other, definitely.
This slime mold right here, Trichia decipiens, is from Tasmania. The picture of it was taken by Sarah Lloyd, a mycomycete expert who lives right in the center of the island. And one of the curious ways that our islands speak to each other, and I'll call them ours just to express love, not ownership or power over, but just is through a mushroom. There is one mushroom that we share, and it only exists on Tierra del Fuego and Tasmania. It's not this one, but it's actually a similar color. Yeah.
That's amazing.
That is amazing. How did that happen?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, Gondwana probably, but maybe also continuously the winds that connect us, because the wind currents from these two islands or archipelagos are continuously shifting and moving from one place to the other. They like to visit.
Yeah. I'd love to tell the story.
Gosh, that reminds me, I don't know where I heard this from, maybe you, Camila, but I heard that even winds are going extinct these days, because of climate change. Even winds that have blown forever, their paths are changing, or they don't exist in the same way that they used to. So that's yet another kind of way in which we're entering these really uncharted territories.
Yeah.
I suppose I should mention the thing that we are kind of ostensibly here to talk about. I mean, the name of the issue, multinaturalism, it's a term which not that many people may be familiar with. So I just kind of wanted to briefly outline what I understood of the term, but to also open it up to the two of you to ask whether or not you think it's a useful concept, and then whether or not you think the term itself is useful, or if maybe there's other ways of thinking or talking about this idea. But essentially, it's a term that, as far as I understand, was coined by the Brazilian anthropologist Eduardo Viveiros de Castro, and it came about after extensive work that he had done among First Nations of the Amazon region. And I think it's an idea that I've heard expressed in many places. And the idea is that in creation times, everything is a human, or at least person. And through various events, people take on different forms, and those forms may be animal, they may be plant, they may be rock, mountain, river, but essentially they still maintain, in these cosmologies, they maintain a kind of personhood, and therefore every human is connected to every natural entity, and in a system of kind of equality and kinship, and you cannot separate yourself from the natural world because you are embedded in it, and the natural world is also a world of people and needs to be negotiated with and respected. So I find this idea incredibly beautiful and compelling, but I know that there would be certain critics that would say that's just anthropomorphism, you know, seeing humans in nature is the problem. But then the counter argument to that is that we've always been anthropomorphic, and we've only stopped being anthropomorphic or saying that was a bad way to be when Western science kind of ascended and said that that was an unscientific way of thinking. But that, of course, is the exact time and place where the worst exploitations of the natural world occur, because there's a separation and we no longer see ourselves reflected in nature. So I guess I feel that this idea of multinaturalism holds a germ of promise for re-engaging with the natural world in a way which acknowledges connection and acknowledges kinship. And I guess my interest, perhaps again starting with you, Camila, just knowing that you have been involved in some efforts toward attributing personhood status to a particular river, Aconcagua, is that correct? Or you at least know people involved in that particular struggle. And I wonder if you could talk to the thinking behind, the imperatives, the logics behind such a quest, if you like.
I'm shape-shifting here to answer this.
You are the river.
It's so fitting, I have to say, with the conversation.
Often. I remember how excited I was when I first read about multinaturalism. It seemed to express what I think most children feel always, which is that you can find people in trees and in plants and in animals, And by people, I mean friends that you talk to and that you share dreams and stories with and make jokes and can dance with. And so to see that being put in the adult world seemed like a great thing, even if it was in the hands of an anthropologist. But it was clear to me that Eduardo was learning such a thing from a people that that inhabited that spirit, and by that I mean a spirit that everything is human unto itself, and acknowledges its selfhood in the world. Flowers know they are beautiful and smelly and deliciously aromatic. It's evident when you look at them. They're there with you, and to not give them the acknowledgement of their spirit. Seems to me a little mezquino, we would say, like, how would you say that?
Diminishing?
Yeah, not just ungenerous. Yeah, just ungenerous. And so with such a being as a river, and a river is not just a river. A river comes from a glacier, and moves through and into the earth, and then meets the ocean, and then evaporates, and then becomes a cloud, and travels back to the mountaintop, and again takes part in its glacial body. So to be ungenerous with a creature as multinatural, to use multinaturalism even in a different way, as transformative as a river, is something that I just can't stand any longer. And there are many people who have also for more years than I been advocating for this kind of recognition of these beings in the world, and the kinds of rights that they deserve in our legal system. They have their own legal system, and this is something that I much learned being in Aboriginal Australia. So many teachers have given me the words and to express the things that I'm saying today. Mary Graham and Gregory Lehman and Greg Lehman from Tasmania, they I think are the ones that have really given me the breath to come back here and take part in certain movements of a similar kind, which is, how do you advocate for your river friend and not only work for your rights but also for their rights, and that's what's happening here in Chile. But it's a complicated, very complicated task. However, there's a little bit of an edge up which is happening now in Chile, and it's that we will begin to write a new constitution very soon. We vote for it's going to be a civil constitution, so written by the people. We get to elect who on the 11th of April. And there are many of the candidates who want to be part of the constitutional writing process, which is going to take 2 years, which have very high on their agenda the personhood of non-human beings. So hopefully Chile will be a country to watch and yeah,
wow,
and follow.
Wonderful.
I'm also really interested in the sort of this idea of personhood, and I suppose the inherent value and rights of nature, and how that's expressed within, I mean, at least in an Australian context, like a Western legal framework, a settler colonial framework, and how that exists simultaneously alongside law, you know, here, and the many different ways in which that manifests in different countries. It's I think there's so much value in I suppose identifying where alignments are, I guess. And I think that this is a place of possible alignment, you know, this notion of personhood within these legal frameworks that at least somewhat speak to, you know, First Nations ideas around entities or beings, and the ways in which we relate to each other in the world, what country is, you know, and how we co-create each other. I suppose, I think one thing that really, I find it difficult with multinaturalism. I think that sort of anthropomorphism, I think, again, I think it has its utility, absolutely. And there is something so beautiful, as you said, Camila, about the joy in that. And as you spoke, I remembered, you know, moving to Tasmania when I was little and racing out at recess in the very first year that we lived there to wrap my arms around the trees, because I just love them, you know. And it was so nice to be among them. And but at the same time, I'm really curious, I think, about, is it possible? What could it mean to relate to other beings without on their terms? Like, what could that look like? And, you know, that's something that I really, I'm in the process of figuring out, or constantly asking myself, I think. And one of my own, I think it manifests in one of the practices I've been engaging with lately, which is writing meditations on country, actually, which relates in part, I think I was really interested in the notion of advocating for country or land, and speaking, again, within that legal context, as country or land. So that I find really, really interesting, this idea, like, how is it possible for me in this form to speak for country, and what might my kind of my purposes and motivations be in that? Is it also simultaneously possible for me to speak as country, you know, because ultimately, you know, and you would have heard this again and again, okay, Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people speaking of this here, that we are country. Country is us. There is no separation. There is only relatedness and relationships. That was actually another thing, and you reminded me again, Camila, as you spoke of the river and its transformative forms, and that really interested me in when reading about multinaturalism, was this notion that it has the capacity, like it holds that transformative possibilities within it, you know, this notion of, you know, the physical form as being not simply form, but affect, habits, and the capacity for what we might understand as physical form, you know, as a fixed thing, is actually a constant process, which, I think that's where I kind of found that idea quite exciting, because I thought that it really resonated with, this notion of relationships, you know, relationships to ourselves as we change as humans over our lives, and those changing relationships to where we live, because movement, as I'm hearing, you know, I think it's really might resonate with all of us. Like, movement's been such a big part of my life, and for part of my story and my family's story for so many generations. And how does that movement become part of us? Like, how do those places and those stories connect in with that movement too?
I feel there's so many synergies here in terms of this idea of writing from country and writing to country and maybe even as country. And I know, Camila, in your PhD, you were certainly experimenting with so many forms of writing and writing love letters to Karukinka. And I just wonder if both of you perhaps could talk to your practices in terms of maybe writing, meditating, walking, what it is that you do that helps you kind of connect to country, maybe on a daily basis or just in your life, and how these kind of how these daily personal practices become like a practice that that builds something, and maybe that can be shared as well.
Lauren, do you want to start?
Sure.
I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear about your meditation.
Yeah, I think walking is a very big part of my practice, which I guess connects into that idea of movement in country, as country. Part of actually my master's thesis, I was interested in the notion that how kind of do place, movement and story create the conditions in which each other can arise, I suppose. And walking on country and just being, you know, being present, learning to listen. It's a listening as well, really, to create, I suppose, the space in which I might learn to recognize the ways in which all the beings that constitute country relate to each other in ways that I don't necessarily recognize yet. So I think it's a big part of that process, that almost not exactly clearing the self away, but because I'm there necessarily and part of what's unfolding. But I think so often, for me at least, maybe this is universal, myself becomes so big that it can take up all the room and, you know, the room. And it takes practice to center my focus on the relationships that are unfolding, on my place in the world. Yeah, as you said, Camila, which is really so, I find this idea so comforting, that I'm so small, you know, and that I'm among so many. I think it's, you know, Michaela spoke about this beautifully in the article, you know, and Mary's work too, obviously, just this idea that you're never alone. I really have always felt that. I feel like I'm in the presence of so many, and it's such a wonderful thing. And I'm interested in what they have to say, you know, and I'm interested in whether or not I can understand, and how I might learn to understand. And I guess that connects to what I was saying before, like, how might they speak? How might I listen? And how might that manifest in my own writing practice. So meditations on country is a real kind of engagement with those ideas. Obviously also speaking to the yogic tradition, and which I'm very, blessed to been, gifted that practice in my life. And really just the question, I suppose, is how can I share this too, my particular perspective or experience, or even just this idea, like in an embodied way, that people might, something other people might be able to participate in, because you can't necessarily, not everybody has access necessarily to walking on country, like in the sense that they might not be able to get to particular places. This is interesting. I'm noticing a binary arising. I'm in a constant process of, and I've really noticed that since moving to Melbourne as well, like this notion of, obviously we're always on country, but to really feel that, to allow for the transformation of my own relationship to what it means to be on country, to what it means to walk on country, and how I can sort of consistently engage in the process of identifying dualisms as they arise in my own thinking, and which I've internalized over the years and generations probably. And I think that's also part of this being here, this living in the city, and I suppose finding sanctuary here in really, learning to feel the concept that everything is alive, which can be overwhelming here, where there's so much of aliveness, and that's different to the places that I have spent a lot of years in my life. Creating the space for that quiet, I think, is really important here for me personally, and again, to just invite people into reflecting on the ways in which countries sustain us here, everywhere. The generosity, that country just embodies. Asking how we can reciprocate, I think, is a big part of my practice too, or figuring out exactly what it is that I can contribute. As you know, Tessa, one of my responses has been planting as well, like a very, which has so many layers too, obviously, planting out the front garden with a lot of native plants that are part of the plant community here, prior to colonization in particular, but also plants that represent or sort of connect Kulin country to my own country and cultural practice as well, and the connections that I see arising between here and there. I've really felt a lot between here and there while I've been here. Last year was actually, in the midst of all of its tragedies, a gift of intimacy, of place, and of really, feeling like I'm becoming a part of the soil here.
Camila is definitely part of the soil.
I wanted to read us something from Multinaturalism, from this amazing compendium you've put together, Tessa. As I was hearing you speak, Lauren, I was reminded of the words in Cecilia Vicuña's piece, which is called Plant Animal, 3 Thoughts on Alliance. And the very beginning, so the first thought on alliance says the following: our union with plants began with an ancient alliance of foot and soil. The soul of the foot gave the plant its name, planta. To drive in with the soul of the foot, la planta del pie, la planta del pie. The word act of planting were born when vision entered the soil. We don't name the plant, but our relation to her. And this, I was hearing you speak, and I think that I very much share that practice of walking on country and really feeling that touch, the sensuality of being in the world, of moving through air, of held by earth, of maneuvering in space with water, humidity, with rain, with wind, and how that contact is continuous. We have all sorts of ways in which we focus and we concentrate and we put maybe aside some of the effects of that continuous contact to be able to, I guess, engage more unilaterally. And so when you spoke of these contradictions you feel, for me, contradictions are a sign of that porosity, that complexity, and the entanglement, which we sometimes seem to comb out, and things fit more neatly into their paths. But all of that matter constantly touching is really more true to that ongoingness. And it seems like it's that ongoingness that both fascinates the three of us here and worries us. We want to serve it because we're awed by it, because we realize how luxurious it is to be part of it and within it. I take to the sand and to the mountain every day. If I don't, or I can't, it not only puts me in a really bad mood, but it's somehow makes me how to say this? It's to be with and in the world, and speaking to the world, and with and for and within it is really the only thing that keeps me alive. In that the life that I lead is not my own. It has some tones and hues related to Camila, but really it's much more about this relationship of being seen and seeing, and tuning into what that relationship requires. So it's that's so beautiful about that piece by Cecilia. So we name the relationship. So everything that comes with telling stories or writing is about that relationship, and that relationship is changing and it's transformative and it's complicated, and by many of the structures that we've set up to stay focused. So to tell stories that serve the ongoingness, I feel like I need to be in the world for many hours during the day, being witness to it. And so my writing craft is just as much a walking practice, a breathing space, as it is a writing. And sometimes I don't write for days, but I feel I am writing because I'm being written by the world.
Yes.
That is so beautiful.
That's
I
exactly.
guess that's exactly how you feel, Lauren.
Yeah.
I guess I'm sort of wanting to draw this beautiful conversation to a close, and I was just thinking about that I didn't say right at the outset that although Lauren is not in the magazine, she was kind of there right at the very start as well, and that we had some beautiful conversations that have contributed to my thinking and understanding. And also that my relationship to Camila extends even further back to my very, to the very first year that I was living in Melbourne, in Naarm, and that we met, and how that has really helped me sort of pursue the things that I think really matter, rather than the things that kind of assert themselves and get in the way of the things that really matter. And having said that, I just wanted to go back to the title or subtitle or extra title of this talk, which is Restore the Future. And that's a phrase that Lauren came up with, that she said in a class, one of my classes where she was a guest. And whether or not, Lauren, it's something that you think all the time, or whether it's something that just words that just fell out of your mouth on that day, it just really resonated, and I had to write it down. And I just wondered if you would like to kind of just talk very briefly about what that might mean as we end this session and go back to our lives and continue with our day or night. Yeah, so restore the future.
That may have been one of the instances in which country spoke through me. I don't know that I can take all the credit. But I think it's actually something I probably, sort of the beginning of that thought arrived a few years ago, when I was spending quite a lot of time in the past, I suppose, learning about it, seeking it. And I think that it's really a part of my sense of coming to understand myself in relation to place and history and who I am as a person, what my story is. And at that time, I sort of had a moment in the midst of all of that where, as valuable as it was, I realized that I think I'm prone to nostalgia, and I realized just how much, I was sort of caught up in this idea of restoring the past, and that we're, yeah, I mean, in that, I mean, obviously I'm here and now, and we are, if you look at it in a linear perspective, I guess, you know, we are constantly being propelled into the future, and it's not actually possible to return to the past. But from a cyclical perspective, the past is also here, and so is the future, and they echo in each other. And I think this idea around restoring the future arose out of perhaps even a resistance to the idea of being defined by loss. A real feeling of presence, of the presence of that past, of the presence of the ancestors, of my family, the fact that everyone is here, is still with us, will continue to be with us, is in country, as country. And I think that shift for me was really profound, and that's at least part of what I meant by that, I think, is just this being conscious of that here and now, and beginning here alongside everybody else who's come before me and who will come after me.